Hi there, listener, and welcome to episode 92 of Prague Talk, a podcast produced by Radio Prague International. My name is Ian Willoughby. In this edition, we've got a very special guest, Bijan Sabet, who became US Ambassador to Prague early in 2023. Since then, Mr. Sabet, or Bijan as he prefers to be called, has become a familiar face here in the city, meeting top Czech officials and military top brass, and hosting events with various civil society groups. Recently, Bijan Sabet, a successful tech investor, came into our studios in Prague's Vinohrady for a conversation taking in a whole range of different areas, including his connection to Joe Biden, his experience as an early backer of Twitter, and training in the art of diplomacy, as well as more personal matters such as his interest in photography and his experience of actually living and working here in Czechia. So this is me talking to US Ambassador Bijan Sabet for this edition of Prague Talk. About a month ago, you tweeted a very pretty photo of Prague that you had taken with the words, "Most days I pinch myself to make sure I'm not dreaming." Why do you need to pinch yourself?
You know, for me now, I've been in the Czech Republic for nearly 11 months, and I just find myself so pleased and happy to be here. The work, the people I've met, the connections, and I have now this deep appreciation for being in this country, and I'm just grateful is the word I keep coming back to every time I think about walking to the embassy, all my interactions all over this country, inside Prague, outside Prague. And so I just find this feeling that I have to pinch myself every day.
Prior to being appointed, had you been to Prague or Czechia?
I have not had the pleasure to do that. My wife, as I mentioned in a prior private conversation, had been here in June of 1990. After the Velvet Revolution, of course, and the subsequent elections. And so she shared her experience with me. But, you know, coming here, living here for 11 months is far more impactful than any prior tourist visit or other kind of visit. I really have genuinely, I can't imagine ever not being here.
But just to come back to your wife,
Yeah.
She came here in June 1990, during the first free elections after the revolution.
That's right. It was a bit of a spontaneous trip. She was a university student studying in Strasbourg. And, you know, after the wall fell, was very interested in what was happening in the country. And she came. She has a number of photographs that, you know, we've looked at quite a bit back in those days because we've been together for quite a while. And then we took those photos out of the shoebox before we moved to Prague, and visited different areas of the country looking at these photographs from June of 1990, and the contrast is clearly remarkable.
And she met Paul Simon. That's what I want you to talk about.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
She met Paul Simon on Old Town Square.
Yes, you have a good memory. She did meet Paul Simon. He performed this concert here, this historic concert, and she met him just randomly on the square, as well as Lorne Michaels of Saturday Night Live fame. He was also here at the time. And just really just something so special.
When did you find out that you had got the posting to Prague? And when you found out, how did you go about preparing to take the post?
Well, I won't forget. I received a call from the White House on March 4th, 2022. It was a Friday. I remember it very well. And, you know, basically the conversation was the president wants you in Prague. And I was trying to be very calm and professional, but on the inside I was doing acrobatics. I was quite pleased, and you know, our process is you're nominated by the president and then confirmed by the Senate. So I received that call in March of 2022, and then I went through all the process and was sworn in December.
When you say the process, is there some kind of training, or how did you go from being an investor to being a diplomat in this relatively short period of time?
Our system is a bit unique compared to other systems in other countries. You know, in the U.S. system, about a third of our ambassadors come from the private sector. And this has been the case for quite a long time. So I am carrying on with this tradition of the president really choosing his ambassadors in many countries. A lot of NATO countries, you'll see this be the case. And so I'm particularly proud to have the president's trust to serve here. But the training was quite comprehensive. It was quite detailed. There's an ambassador school that the State Department organizes, so it's 3 weeks of intense engagements. And then I spent, months with colleagues in the State Department and other U.S. government agencies, really preparing for the work and for the role. And all of that was incredibly informative. But, again, being here is far more informative than any training back in Washington.
I guess the biggest items in your agenda here as ambassador were the Defense Cooperation Agreement that's already been pushed through, also the F-35 fighter jets, and the extension of the Dukovany nuclear power plant, which an American company is tendering for. How do you get up to speed on all these subjects? Do you have like huge dossiers that you have to study, like kind of homework?
There's a significant amount of material that the team puts together. And you're right, we've had a big priority of my work is on our shared security. The U.S. and the Czech Republic are strong NATO allies, and our work here together is to strengthen NATO's eastern flank. And the two items you mentioned, the Defense Cooperation Agreement and the F-35 procurement by the Czech government, are two important elements of this work. But we continue to do many, many other types of engagements to really strengthen NATO, strengthen the eastern flank, help protect Ukraine. But yes, the team prepares me diligently, and it's really something I'm very grateful for.
One reason I wanted to speak to you, Bijan, is there isn't that much information about you online. And I thought our listeners and readers would be curious to know about who you are. And I'd like to ask you about your family background. Where did your parents come from?
So I was born in the United States, but my parents were not. My parents both immigrated to the U.S. in the 1960s. My father came from Iran. He immigrated in 1967 to the United States as a medical doctor. And my mother immigrated the same year from South Korea. She's also now retired, but was also a medical doctor as well.
And do you speak their languages?
I don't. In those days, at least my parents, their common language was English. And so that was the language spoken in the home. They didn't come with a large, families or relatives. So I think their feeling at the time was just to try to, assimilate and be part of the American dream. They both became American citizens as fast as they could. And, this was kind of their hope and dream, was they were going to live this American dream and raise an American family. That was kind of their attitude.
You're a Democratic Party supporter. How were your politics influenced by your upbringing? Also, the fact that you come from an immigrant family.
Well, I grew up around the kitchen table with a recurring theme of the importance of democracy and freedom. Both of my parents came from different countries, but both had a profound sense of the importance of democracy and freedom. My mother grew up telling us about how grateful she was to U.S. service members saving her country from communism, and my father talking about the importance of equal rights and freedom and democracy, especially where he came from. So this was, I think, a very big impression upon me, and really, I think the other piece that my parents have always instilled on me is being engaged, and that apathy and disengagement were really things to avoid.
You were a supporter and donor to Joe Biden when he ran a couple of years ago for president, successfully, of course. Why Biden? Why did you back Biden?
I have been involved in supporting campaigns in the United States for quite some time, because I am engaged in areas and topics most important to me. There's a lot of values and priorities that then candidate, now President Biden, stood behind, that I found to be really inspiring. His experience, really, I felt was unmatched domestically, foreign policy-wise. But the thing that I really have always felt strongly about President Biden is his superpower. His really unique superpower is his empathy. He has an authentic way to listen and care and connect with people that, at least in my lifetime, I've never seen a U.S. president with this level of genuine empathy.
And tell us about the connection between him and your wife's family.
My wife grew up in a town of Wilmington, Delaware, which is where Joe Biden grew up. And her father, my wife's father, was the police chief in Wilmington, Delaware, when then Senator Biden was taking the train from Wilmington to D.C. They were of similar age. They grew up in the same neighborhood, and they knew each other quite well. In fact, years later, when I then connected with President Biden before he was president, we had a nice discussion, and then he took one look at my wife and said, "You're Denny's daughter," and his eyes just lit up, and he started sharing stories about the two of them and their upbringing in this area called 40 Acres. It's this neighborhood in Wilmington, Delaware, and yeah, they really were contemporaries.
What do you say to people who are concerned about whether Joe Biden has what it takes to win next time and potentially keep out Trump again, given that he's already 81?
You know, my role as U.S. ambassador is I'm not involved in elections or politics or anything like that. But I will say, as president, I believe strongly there's the United States is in great shape to have a president like Joe Biden, and he is the right president for our nation, and really has done a remarkable job domestically and globally.
I was reading that you have a science degree. How did you go from studying science to becoming this extremely successful venture capitalist in the tech sphere?
You know, I always had a bit of a love affair with computers, computer science, and programming. I just really love this idea that you can sit in front of a computer and make something that didn't exist before you sat down for a little while. And so this idea of making something new was something that really captured my attention, despite my parents wanting me to go become a doctor like them. But I really kind of found this excitement of creating things. You know, I went on to work in a number of technology companies in Silicon Valley, including a number of startup companies. And this is where I found, an area that I felt quite impactful, to work with entrepreneurs. And that led me to start my own venture capital or investment firm nearly 20 years ago. And my work was really centered around investing and partnering with young entrepreneurs from the earliest days and to help them build important companies.
One of the many companies that you were involved with was Twitter. You were there in the early days. You have a one-word Twitter handle, just @Bijan. What was Twitter like when you were involved?
I was first introduced to the product before I became an investor. The company had launched this product, maybe a few months before I met them, and I was immediately hooked. I felt this was something new in that it was the first time I saw a product that combined utility with entertainment. It was useful and fun. Google I thought was useful but not very fun, and games were fun but not very useful. So this was something really extraordinary and new. And then I met the three founders, and I just found them truly inspiring. They had a very strong vision, and it was at that point where I set out to join their board and become an investor. They had maybe 10 or 11 employees at the time and a very small user base, principally in the West Coast of the United States. But I really believed in what they were building.
I've seen you say on Twitter that you prefer Threads now, but you're still active on Twitter. How do you view what Elon Musk has done and is still doing to Twitter?
I think the power of social media and social networks is significant, but we're also now seeing the challenges of these platforms: disinformation, misinformation, other types of activities around. You can see bad behavior on these platforms, etc. And one thing I have, been concerned about with the current ownership is there enough emphasis, prioritization, and energy around solving some of the challenges of these social platforms? And I'm not convinced this is happening.
I know you and your family are based in Boston, where you studied. Previously, as you said, you lived in Silicon Valley. As an East Coast guy, what was that like? What was the experience like of living in Silicon Valley?
I was in Silicon Valley from 1991 to 2001, so for those 10 years, and I, found it really instructive and informative about this idea of trying to build new things. At the time, the East Coast of the United States in the tech sector was fairly conservative in terms of their willingness to try new things. At this point, they've caught up considerably, and now I think you see a vibrant entrepreneur ecosystem all over the U.S. So it's not the same as what I experienced in Silicon Valley during that time frame. But what I took away from it, and it really gets me excited about being here in the Czech Republic, is this type of entrepreneurial spirit. And what I experienced in Silicon Valley, I'm seeing in Brno, I'm seeing in Prague, I'm seeing in different parts of this country where, young entrepreneurs have an itch they want to scratch. They have a passion that they want to build something new. And I've been really happy to meet with entrepreneurs all over this country and see if we can be helpful. And for me, this has been very satisfying.
Now, of course, you live at the lovely ambassador's residence in Prague 6, the Peček Villa, which one of your predecessors, Norman Eisen, wrote a very interesting book about. What's it like to call that place home?
That's a really great book. I think it should be required reading for anybody that serves as U.S. ambassador, because it tells the history of that house from the family that built the house, as well as the subsequent people that lived in the house throughout the next 100 years. And so I think it's a really very well researched book. But for me, living there every single day, clearly it's beautiful, it's historic, but it's significant. It's really significant because that home has been a place where you, Americans and Czechs, have been engaged on a wide range of topics before the Velvet Revolution, and then clearly after. There are stories I hear from people, Czechs, that tell me, oh, that's the room where Václav Havel and U.S. Ambassador Bill Luers used to talk about X, Y, and Z, and that's where Ambassador Shirley Temple Black used to engage on these topics, and her dog used to run through here, and they used to work with dissidents in this room, and now we're having conversations with civil society leaders, entrepreneurs, members of civil society pursuing prioritizing LGBTQ and same-sex marriage issues. So the work continues of Americans and Czechs in that house working together to solve global challenges.
As a first-time ambassador, what have been some of the harder things to get used to about the position?
It is definitely a change. My time is really the thing I have to be the most kind of thoughtful about in terms of prioritizing my time. And I really, this is something I'm very intentional about. There's other, types of things where I would like, could people call me by my first name would be nice. So I've always insisted when I get to meet people, I certainly, want to break through any kind of types of formalities and really just to get to know people. But really, my work here, I consider the greatest honor of my life. And so this is not something I ever feel is anything but a blessing. So I'm so happy to be here.
You mentioned LGBT rights. You took part yourself in Prague Pride this year. You welcome women's rights groups to your residence and the embassy. What are the values you feel like you're promoting in your position?
I have really come to understand that as the U.S. ambassador here, I can play a role using my platform, my voice, and to share the discussions that I have with people in a more public way. And, these topics that we're talking about, whether it's LGBTQI plus rights or same-sex marriage, these are global challenges that are challenges in, everywhere. And I'm pleased that, most Czechs would like to see advancements in these areas. And so I am proud to lend my voice and stand with and for these types of topics. And, we would welcome more ways to create equality for members of the LGBTQ community to have full and equal protection, as well as improving gender equality issues.
You have 3 kids. Have they spent much time in Prague, and how do they find Czechia?
Yeah, so my 3 kids have been here a lot since I've arrived. All 3 spent the entire summer here, working, studying, etc. They will be back over the Christmas holiday. One of my children is studying here this fall semester, so they love it. They really love it.
You've also got a dog. What's the name and the breed first?
Yeah, I do have a dog. His name is Sam. He's 10 years old. He's a yellow Labrador Retriever.
Does the fact that you have a dog mean that you have to interact with Czechs more, or maybe learn a couple of basic words like kind of dog Czech, like, female, male, and all that kind of stuff?
some of my colleagues, Czech colleagues, told me as a joking matter that Czechs may like dogs more than people because it's such a dog-friendly place.
That's not a joke.
And so I don't know if this is true, but I will say it is very obvious how much Czech people love dogs. And I've met so many people in the parks walking my dog and getting to know their dog and their story. And it's like the fastest friendship maker ever is to have a dog in Prague. It's been wonderful.
I know you're also a music fan, and you told me you used to go back in the day to the famous New York club, CBGB's. Have you, when you were a teenager, have you got to go to any gigs in Prague?
Yeah, no, music is something I really have a passion for. I haven't been to as many live shows as I'd like. It's an area I would like to change next year. I did have gone to see some jazz in Prague, but I missed some of the bigger music festivals this year. I couldn't make the calendars work, but I will remedy this next year.
You're also a keen photographer.
Yeah.
What kind of photography do you do?
I love photography. I have a particular interest in analog photography, and I have some kind of personal connection to analog films that I find really enjoyable. So I've been taking photographs all over the Czech Republic with these old analog cameras, and it's been a lot of fun.
I saw online that you got a Flexaret camera. What's a Flexaret?
That's right. Yeah, the Flexaret is previously a Czechoslovak camera. It's a very particular kind of camera. It's a medium format camera. It is, at the time was very popular, and it's was designed very well. For those in the audience that may be familiar, it looks kind of as a competitor to like a Rolleiflex type system. And so I found one locally in Prague. Janek Rubiš suggested this place to me, and I went there and I saw it in the window, and I had to buy it. So I'm so pleased to use it right now.
You've also got a dedicated Instagram page to your street photography. And I've always wondered about street photography. What are the kind of ethics of street photography? Do you approach people and ask, or you just take the picture and then ask? How do you do it?
It's a little bit of a judgment call. I think some countries is a little bit more, it's considered acceptable than in other countries. Here in the Czech Republic, I'm very conservative on photographs that I take. I tend to have it at a respectful distance. I'm also looking to make eye contact with the subject to give them a little nod, and if they give me a negative indicator, I just smile, or I may talk to them, but I won't certainly take their photograph. So it's kind of use your judgment type thing.
You posted a photo of your dad in Prague also taking photos. What does he make of the fact that you have become ambassador to Czechia?
Yeah, my dad loves photography. I'm 100% convinced this is where I got it from. He's 84 years old, and he was lugging around a big zoom lens all over Prague. I was really impressed. But for my dad and my mother, when they came this year, they were just so proud. They have their own way of expressing themselves, but it was very clear that they just felt like this was something they were immensely proud of, and for them it felt like a fulfillment of the American dream.
My final question, I know you're also a listener of Radio Prague. Tell us about your listening habits.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up. I mean, when I was nominated, I was doing everything I could to learn about Czech history, culture, news, and so I immediately came upon this news program. And so nearly every day, I should say, I was listening. I heard your voice in my ears, the Radio Prague jingle every day. My wife and I would listen to it routinely in the car or around the kitchen table. And I learned so much about what was happening, different moments in history, your interviews and the news. And so I was listening to it routinely when I was in the States, and I continue to do so here.
Well, that's extremely gratifying. And that's all we have time for. So Bijan, Sabet, thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Many thanks indeed to Bijan, Sabet and the US Embassy staff who helped organize our interview. This has been episode 89 of Prague Talk, a podcast from Radio Prague International. So if you're new to us, there are clearly scores more out there for your listening pleasure. Why not listen to a few episodes and sign up wherever you get podcasts? But for now, from me, Ian Willoughby, thank you so much indeed for listening to Prague Talk. and talk to you again very soon.